I'm finally getting to the Adityas course. This is a course I've been wanting to teach for a very, very long time. It's something I've been playing with, researching with since 2007 actually. And the last 3 years, it's really gotten more intensified as I've been trying to prepare to give this course. This course gives us an opportunity to learn some very ancient Hindu astrology, like true Hindu symbology of astrology. There's no question where the Adityas come. There's no question where the Gandharvas have originated. It's all out of India. It's all out of Hinduism. And it really is a true Vedic, Indian, Hindu type astrology. There's a lot of controversy over Aries, Taurus, Gemini even originating in India. And there's actually more evidence pointing to that those symbols didn't originate there. Not to say they're not great symbols. They're valid, they're useful, they're great, and we've been using them for a very long time. And if they were brought to India, well, obviously the Indians thought they were useful, otherwise they wouldn't have used them. But I also feel like we can gain so much by using these old symbols. So this is a course I've been really keen to teach. Okay, so we have these Adityas, which are essentially the different sun gods. Now in the Rig Veda, there's 7 different Adityas. As we evolve or transmute to the Puranic literature, we get 12 Adityas. Okay. The reason there's different numbers in these different sources is because it's the context in which the Aditya is being used. Okay. In this context, we're using it in the context of the signs of the zodiac, for symbols of the signs of the zodiac, basically. We're using the context of the ecliptic. And the ecliptic is divided into 12 parts. Okay? Some Adityas are also Nakshatra lords. They share that lordship with several other beings, and all the Adityas are not Nakshatra lords. Again, that's a whole other scheme. So we don't want to assume that an Aditya has the same meaning in different schemes. So the job of what the Aditya is doing as the symbol of a Rashi is not the same as the job an Aditya doing as a symbol of a nakshatra, and that's not the same as the job of the Aditya in the context of 7 Adityas. Maybe at some point I'll get involved in teaching what that 7 Aditya thing is, but really I feel like the richest symbology is with the 12 Adityas along with the division of the ecliptic into 12 parts, which are basically signs. And so now we have a new symbology for that. The reason I say this is the one I like the most rich in symbolism, is because each of these Adityas travels with 6 other beings. So we have 7 levels of symbology to apply to every sign of the zodiac. Okay? Each of these 7 beings does something else. Okay, take Aries. Aries is, the ram. Okay, that's the base symbology. We also have additional symbology of, Aries is in rocky places. Aries is a fire sign. We have all these types of things that round out the symbology. It's the same with the Adityas. We have this idea that this is the Aditya, and these are 6 other beings that travel with the Aditya. Now what's really great about this symbology is each one of these symbols represents something in our psyche and also represents concrete, real things on the outside. Okay? So these beings represent our interchanges with the world and also what's going on inside ourselves. So each of these beings has a psychological impact and also a worldly impact. Okay? And that's really true for Aries too. Okay, Aries rules rocky places. Okay, that tells you about something of the inside of a person with lots of planets in Aries, of course. Okay? All right, so this is a much older to India symbology. We find the 12 Adityas in the Puranic literature, the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's a few other Puranas that give the 12 Adityas along with their different beings. However, they don't always agree on which being belongs to which month of the year, or which solar month of the year, or to which sign of the ecliptic, basically. Okay? I've gone with the one shown in the Srimad Bhagavatam. I feel like that is most correct. But there is 1 or 2 small errors in there. It's not in respect to the Aditya. It's not in respect to the Rishi. It's in respect to things like the Apsara. So we're not going to worry about that now. We'll deal with that at a later time. Okay? So I very much like the symbology or the arrangement of the Adityas to the different months of the year, the different signs of the ecliptic that are given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay? But be aware that if you look at Adityas in other places, or someone else maybe starts teaching them, they might actually deal with them in the context of a slightly different arrangement for some of them. Okay? And I feel like when you really understand the Adityas, you realize like, oh yes, this is why the Srimad Bhagavatam is the correct way. On a superficial level, some of the things might make sense in the context of, oh yeah, Vishnu should not be the 8th Aditya. It belongs over here. But when you really understand Vishnu, you'll go, oh yeah, Vishnu is the 8th Aditya, not the 12th Aditya, which some other sources have. Okay? So, I'm going to talk later about, the exact calculation of the Adityas in the next video. And I've talked about that on YouTube a little bit, but I'm going to have a more thorough class on that for this course, so everything's complete. So right now I just want to start by introducing the different beings. Okay, there's the Aditya. The Aditya is the sun god. Now Aditya means of Aditi. Aditi is a divine mother aspect. Okay, and she, in the context of astrology, because each Aditya is 30 degrees of the ecliptic. Okay, which is the length of a sign or a Rashi. So each Aditya represents 30 degrees. So when the sun's in that 30 degree portion, it's thought that this Aditya is at large. Okay, and then the sun goes into another 30 degree portion, and now this Aditya is at large. Okay? Now, so Aditi in this context is the circle. And the Adityas are of the circle. They're the 12 parts of the circle. Now in mythology, Aditi is the wife of Kashyapa, and she has 12 children, which are the 12 Adityas. So they're of her. She gives birth to them. Now that's mythological, that's symbolic. Astronomically speaking, astrologically speaking, we have the circle of the zodiac, which is Aditi, and the 12 divisions of that zodiac are her children, the Adityas. All 12 of those children embody an aspect of Aditi. But none of them alone are Aditi. Okay? All of them together is the full circle of Aditi. Alright? So essentially when we look at Aditya, we're looking at a part of Aditi. And astronomically that means a part of, represents a part of the ecliptic. On an inner level, on a psychological level and spiritual level, Aditi is Divine Mother, and each Aditya is an aspect of the love of the Divine Mother. Okay? So, we're dealing with very old forces, including the force of love, when we're looking at these Adityas in the context of the astronomy and the circle and where your planets are. Okay? Alright, so, and her husband Kashyapa, okay, which is the father of the Adityas, like he's one of the Rishis, and there's many Rishis, but of all the Rishis, he's the one that has differentiated the most species. So like one Rishi gives birth to this species, another Rishi gives birth to this or does that. Kashyapa gave birth to the most species. He also gave birth, most importantly, to the human species. So he's the father of humankind, and he's the father of many other beings. Okay? I think I actually wrote some of them down to tell you. Let's see. Okay, he fathered Rakshasas, Nagas, reptiles, birds, and many other living beings. Okay? So this makes him the great differentiator of life. Okay? Other Adityas focus on, okay, we're procreating this type of life. Kashyapa, all kinds of life. Okay? Did he father? He differentiates life. Okay? So basically, when we consider that Aditi is the circle of love, the complete circle, and the 12 Adityas are aspects of her, or portions of the circle, and the father is the great differentiator of life. Essentially, the Adityas are the differentiations of life and the differentiations of love. Okay? We're taking this perfect force symbolized by a circle. We're breaking it into 12 parts. And through that, and those parts are differentiated through the father Kashyapa, and each part is a different thing, a very different thing. Okay? That's why the boundaries between signs are so strong. Like in Vedic astrology, we take a conjunction and we put a planet in the sign, and if the planet's at 29 degrees and other planet's at 1 degree of the next sign, they're not conjunct in the context of Vedic astrology and a sign conjunction or a Rashi conjunction. Because those boundaries create very great differentiations. Okay? Now in other systems of astrology, they all base it on degrees, and the aspects or the conjunctions have nothing to do with these differentiated boundaries. In Vedic astrology, aspects, whether Rashi aspects and conjunctions, have so much to do with these differentiated boundaries. Okay? They're very, very different forces, and for two planets to be conjunct in Vedic astrology, they're sharing that same force. They're not just sharing a portion of space by being 3 degrees apart. Okay, so both types of conjunctions are valid. However, depending on the techniques we're using, we have to use the correct type of conjunction, right? Okay. So, Aditi, by the way, means the unbounded, the unbroken, the undifferentiated, the perfect circle. And then the Adityas are the 12 parts of that circle, essentially. And every month the sun travels, and when it's in a particular, every 30 days, a month roughly, whenever the sun's in a 30-degree portion, it's thought that a certain aspect of the sun is ruling, and the portion of the ecliptic that it travels through during that time contains the qualities of that sun god. And so any planets that are in those 12 parts, basically embody the energy of that solar force, or of that Aditya. But not just that Aditya, also all the other beings that travel with the Adityas. And that's when it gets really interesting. One of the beings is the Rishi. The Rishis are the original sages that were born from Brahma and progenited mankind. There were 7 original Rishis, or second set of original Rishis, after the forced Nakamarmas who refused to breed and create offspring. So they went off and just decided they were going to enjoy enlightenment as little kids. And then Brahma had to create a new batch of Rishis, and those Rishis said, sure, we will create life for you. And they got busy with that, okay? And of course, Kashyapa was the most busy and the most important in our context because he gave birth to human beings. So these sages, these Rishis, had that role of really being the force that created creation, hands-on. Brahma, of course, creates it with the energy of Vishnu, but the hands-on establishment of it through creating offspring was done by these Rishis, okay? But they were not limited to just that, okay? In fact, that's a very small part of who they are. Yes, they created a species, and after that, they're hands-off, okay? In the context of creating more species, and the species promote and propagate themselves, okay? But these Rishis, they support the continued flow of creation, just as they started the living beings in creation, and they continue their support of these living beings. So an enlightened person who continues to support of mankind going in the direction of God's divine will is a Rishi, essentially. And there's many, many Rishis, but there's these older original ones. There's only 7 of those. But in the Adityas, we have 12 Rishis, which are all considered of great importance because they travel with the Aditya, the sun god. Okay? Now, I'll talk more about the Rishis in a moment. Okay? In addition to the Rishis, we have the Apsaras. Now, the Apsaras are a class of female divinities. And they really get not exactly a bad rap, but a limited rap. They're generally portrayed as nymphs. and often the word Apsaras translated as nymph or heavenly nymph. And they're the seducers, they're amorous, they're all absolutely gorgeous, and they cause a lot of mischief to a lot of men. But that's just part of their methodology, let's say. But they are divinities, they have divine purposes, they're the celestial dancers. They are present at ceremonies. They do protect ceremonies. They have lots of roles. We'll talk about a little more briefly, a little more later. Okay? And they're very important beings in the context of what they represent to our psyches. Okay? And they also have the ability to change their shape. So they can be deceptive. They can fool us. They can trick us. And they do whatever they need to do to fulfill their mission to continue the creation of God's will. Okay, all 7 of the beings that travel with the the Ditya and the 6 beings that travel with it all have just one purpose, and that is to fulfill, God's plan on earth. Okay, and they all do it in very different ways. Even the Rakshasas, which are considered the more maleficent beings, are fulfilling their responsibility to ensure life moves along the trajectory, and that we evolve along the trajectory that God wishes, both in our collective lives on earth as a species and within ourselves. Okay? Apsara means going in the waters. Okay? Up means water, sara means like a fluid motion. So this fluid motion going in the water, Almost sounds like a mermaid. However, the context of water is not like the heavy element water that you swim in. The waters is the consciousness, okay? They're flowing through consciousness. It's things that, so much of what flows through our consciousness has to do with the Apsara, okay, that regular flow. They're strongly related to the moon, and they're governed by Soma, which is the moon god, okay? So when we're talking waters here, we're talking the waters of consciousness, and that's a fluid motion. We're not talking about an enlightened consciousness that's still and only perceiving God, but the day-to-day consciousness of the moon, the flowing of our minds, and what's that's yielding, essentially, has a lot to do with these Apsaras. Okay? So, in mythology, you'll see Apsaras oftentimes creating a lot of mischief, seducing Rishis, seducing kings, doing all this stuff, having children of kings and creating great lineages that go on for thousands of years and so on. Like, for instance, the Pandu's great something grandmother was a famous Apsara called Urvasi. Okay, and when Arjuna went to heaven for a little while, she wanted to have sex with him. And he said, no, I can't have sex. You're like my relative. You're a great something grandmother. She got very upset at him and cursed him, and to be a eunuch at some point in his life, and that later on saved his life. So that's exactly how an Apsara works. She comes, tries to seduce Arjuna. He refuses. She gets mad. She's a divine creature. How mad is she really going to get, right? She curses Arjuna so that he can survive a trial later in life when he has to be hidden away. So that's how Apsaras work. They're working for our better good, but they don't always appear that way, like many of these creatures, okay? Now, Apsaras are married to Gandharvas. Gandharvas are generally the spouses of the Apsaras, but both of them are very loose. Both of them are very much sensuous and sexual creatures, and they have open relationships, let's put it that way, okay? Both of them have open relationships, okay? But they're male deities. They live in the sky, they guard the Soma, and again, the Soma governs the Apsaras, okay? The Soma is also the nectar of immortality, and that represents the immortal consciousness that we're all striving to achieve. We're trying to turn our limited human moon consciousness into an immortal consciousness. And that is the Soma, the nectar of immortality. They're governed by Varuna, one of the very important Adityas, and represent the all-encompassing sky and the most loving The Aditya who has the greatest capacity for love is Varuna. Okay, the love that's most close to the love of Aditi is the Varuna love, and we'll talk about that in detail when we get to that. Aditya. They have the knowledge of medicines and healing. They like to be with women. They like to have intercourse, but they're not limited to that. They also get involved with helping Indra in his wars. So they're great warriors. They are always there to fight for Indra. Okay, which is one of the Adityas we'll learn about. Indra and Varuna are two of the most important Adityas and two of the most important gods from the Vedas, from the Rig Veda. And these Gandharvas are working hand in hand with them. So they're very powerful forces. Now, in the mythology that we have left to us, Gandharvas are like these heavenly musicians, heavenly singers. Every once in a while they show up for a battle. More often than not, they're just having sex with some poor woman who they seduce, where the woman sees them and she can't help herself because they're so, so powerful and light beings and, everything that anyone would ever want. So nobody can really resist them, just like no man can resist an Apsara, okay? But they're much more than that. And as we delve into the myths of those Apsaras and Gandharvas, we'll get a much better understanding of the depth of these creatures. One of the unfortunate things is that of these 6 beings that travel with the Adityas, we don't have great myths, we don't have a full spectrum of myths for any of them except the Rishis and the Adityas. The myths of the other ones have been largely neglected and you don't find them easily and you find very few comparatively. So the focus on those other 5 beings unfortunately has decayed over a long time. Okay? And so one of our jobs is to try to grasp the meanings of these symbols, of these beings, at a time when much of what was known about them has been lost. In respect to the other 5 beings, besides the Rishi and Aditya, there's been at least 100 times more loss of knowledge about these beings than we presently have. And that's greatly unfortunate to us as astrologers. And one of the reasons it's taken me so long to get ready for this class, or this course, because I had to do so much really deep thinking and contemplating to get into the heart of this matter, okay? Okay, now, it's very, very important, this idea of song, okay? When we think of music and singing, we're thinking of Def Leppard and Metallica and Madonna, whoever, we're thinking of rock and roll bands or Hindu rock and roll bands, we're thinking of music as we know it today. In the context of the Vedas, in the context of even Jaini Sutras, it's much more than that. What it is, it's Gita, and it's called, for instance, the Gita everyone knows is the Bhagavad Gita. So when you think of song in the context of the Vedas and astrology, don't think of music as we know it, okay? You have to think of it in the context of the Bhagavad Gita. What does that really mean, Gita? It's the song of truth, okay? Everyone has a song. We have this saying, what's your song? What do you vibe to? What makes you feel alive? What do you live for? What's your story? We all follow a song within us, and that's a vibration within us that provokes us to live a certain way we are. And yes, that vibration will choose us to prefer one type of rock and roll to another type of rock and roll, for instance, or one type of music that's been developed in the last 500 years to another type of music, because we vibe with that song. When we talk about the Gandharvas, we're not talking about, a rock star here. We're talking about the force of song of truth within a being. Every being has a truthful vibration. And that is symbolized by the Gandharva. And it's an truthful individual vibration that we have to live by. It'll give certain qualities of character to us. Just like the Apsara represents a flow of consciousness that is part of our identity. And both these, the Apsara and the Gandharva, have so much to do with what makes us the humans, the individuals we are. They're the most human of the 7 beings that we're going to be looking at the mythology about, okay, that individualize us. So the force, the song, the vibration within us that wants to come out and express, because really everything is vibration, which means all of creation is really music. One time you could just perceive it as music. I once had a spiritual experience where I perceived the whole universe as everything, creation as music, And I was like, that's really strange to experience creation as this music, but it's not strange because it is. It's a divine music, and we're all notes within that divine music. And the Gandharva illustrates that note, and that has a mating, a marriage, with the flow of consciousness in our minds, which is the Apsara. So much of our individual identities have to do with these two, the Gandharva and the Apsara, okay? So the song is our true self. I remember seeing a movie long ago where I was really impressed by this movie. Didn't know what Adityas were when I saw this movie, and the guy said, you need to go find your song. What's your song? Oh, you haven't found your song. Go find your song. And he was, this guy who he was, the mentor was a musician, so he related it to in this context. In the context of the Gandharvas and what we're going to be teaching, yes, we're here in a sense to find our song, to find our true vibration and flow with that music, okay, through the Apsara. And they're related, they're mated. You can't separate the Gandharva from the Apsara, okay? So we have to find our song, and that's our true self, and that creates a rhythm to our life, which is a flow of consciousness based on what we really are. So when we really study the Adityas and their symbols, we get to see what force of love are you really? If your life working out or not, well, how are you using this force of love? Are you actually using it or abusing it? Depending on what's going on in your chart, okay? What's your song? Are you running a twisted version of it, a distorted vibration of your true song, your true Gandharva, or you're living that out healthily? Your Apsara, what's the flow in your consciousness, in your human consciousness? Is it a flow that's symbolic of that true self and an expression of that? Something you're aware of within yourself? You're aware of this rhythm because you're aware with your true self? Or is it a twisted, distorted version of that? Okay? We will see all these things when we learn our Adityas. Okay? So as I mentioned, the Gandharvas, and the Apsaras, of course, are the dancers to the music, which is the rhythm, the flow. Okay? The Gandharvas, they guard the Soma, so they're here to guard the nectar of immortality. The nectar of mortality is what people who possess enlightenment have. In guarding the nectar of mortality, basically what this is saying is, the Gandharva is guarding our spiritual life with the development of our consciousness, the development of us finding ourselves. They're the great warriors of Indra who are guarding this process of self-development we're having to really find our true selves, express our true selves, okay? Very, very important beings, okay? They also, they regulate the course of the nakshatras. That's like a heavy statement, okay? So they regulate the nakshatras through the moon's wives. Another name for moon is Soma, okay? The Apsaras are the, are working under the power of the Soma, okay, as we mentioned. And so all this development of our human consciousness, which the nakshatras are such an important part of, are seen by the Gandharva and the Apsara. Okay, that's the human consciousness being transformed and changed to find out what it really is, become pure in what it really is. And the other 5 beings are largely assisting in this. Okay? And of course the Aditya is the most true part of ourself. It's the part that's always going to remain of ourselves. Okay? And that true part is essentially the love that we are and the love we have. But when it comes to the human part, okay, It's all in the, it's so much of it's in the Gandharva and the Apsara. So we'll have a lot of fun when we get to that. Okay? Okay, the next being we have is something called the Yaksha. Now these are really, really interesting beings and amongst my favorite. They're nature spirits, essentially. Unfortunately, most of the knowledge of the Yakshas has disappeared. We have statues of some that have fallen into neglect and haven't been made in 2,000 plus years. They used to make statues of Yakshas. They used to worship and do pujas to these statues of Yakshas. Now it's a lost part of Hinduism. Of course, lost means you can't easily find it, but we know somewhere in India, in some little place somewhere, they're still doing these things, okay? You know, that's the beautiful thing about India. There's always someone who's still doing something that everyone else has forgotten. The question is, are you going to meet that person, okay? So, these are nature spirits, and in myth, they're usually portrayed as these mischievous, powerful, brownie type creatures. You know, brownies are Western creatures that create a lot of mischief, like mischievous elves. But Yakshas are much more larger, much more powerful people, and if they wanted to, they could eat a person, human. They're not powerful, and they're full sized. You know, they're not little tiny beings. But eating people is not what they do, fortunately. But they can be mischievous. They do cause trouble. They do come into conflict with humans at times in mythologies. And they're essentially connected to all forms of nature, to water, forest, trees, fertility, and also to the treasure that's found in nature. Okay? So a big part of worshiping Yakshas was to get treasure. Okay? Their king is Kubera, who's the lord of wealth. He's the king of the Yakshas. That's the biggest thing we know about the Yakshas is that Kubera is the king, is their king, and he's the lord of wealth. And you think about it, where does all wealth come from? All wealth comes from the earth, right? Okay? The gems, the gold, the food, these are all the things that indicate wealth. We have these things when we have wealth. We don't have these things when we don't have wealth. So wealth is something we get out of earth, and these are nature spirits, and they basically represent harmonizing with nature. If people harmonize with nature, they have long-term wealth and health. If they don't harmonize with nature, they might have short-term wealth, but eventually it catches up to them. Okay? So these beings become very mischievous, very, very troublesome when a person is out of harmony with nature. Okay? They also can be guides, I think, appearing as tricksters. Okay? They're here to teach us how to benefit from nature, but they might teach us that in a very, very mischievous way. Okay? If we're working in harmony with nature, wealth can be long-term. If we're at disharmony, it can't be long-term. Okay? All right, and unfortunately, like I said, that we've lost more information on Yakshas than any other of the 7 beings that we're going to be discussing in this course. Next, we have the Nagas. The Nagas are a serpentine race of human beings. Okay? They can breed with humans. In fact, all these beings can breed with humans. But the most human ones are the Apsaras and the Gandharvas. They're human in every way that you look at them, except they're like stunning humans. Although Gandharvas are often considered to be golden-skinned and radiant, okay? But they're very human-formed. Nagas, Yakshas, not so much. It's like some Yakshas might have a horse's head or something like that. Nagas have a serpentine lower half, so they're half serpent, and they can turn themselves into full serpents. And lots of times in myth, they're cruising around doing their things as full serpents. But they have the ability to be human and half human. And there's myths of humans marrying Nagas. Not a lot, but it happens, okay? The most common thing we hear about Nagas is they've victimized humans, and in return, or even maybe in the beginning, they've been victimized by humans to a much greater degree than they have ever hurt humans. And it really is just like the snakes. People are so scared of snakes, but the truth is, snakes have been victimized by humans much, much more than humans have ever been victimized by snakes, okay? Lots of times they're portrayed as unfriendly and dangerous, but they help the mythological heroes, the great souls they help. The other people, not interested. Only the great souls hold it. Only the great souls get the benefit of the Nagas. Okay? The Nagas represent a serpentine force in us, which we'll discuss a lot when we get into the Nagas as a whole. Okay? Now this serpentine force, this powerful life force, more often than not, gets people into trouble than not. And therefore Nagas are portrayed as troublesome beings. The trouble is, we don't use our life force in a healthy way enough. Okay? Any fears, anyone who has fears, it's the fears there because of an imbalance in their life force. When we have an imbalance of life force, we start getting fears. The most common fear throughout the world is the fear of snakes. Okay? It's by far the most common fear. And in some people there's a rational basis with it, maybe they had a bad experience, but in the majority of people it's a completely irrational basis. It's a universal symbol, serpents. All cultures have them. They're all about transmuting energy into spirituality. So the Nagas help the great heroes. To the others, they're more likely to bite them and cause them trouble. Because when you're not using your life force right, you come into imbalances that causes you health problems, psychological problems, psychosis, and fears. So every fear you have has to do with an imbalance of your life force that keeps it from just flowing naturally with the being that you are. So much of what we have to learn to do here is to have a healthy flow of our life force. So much of what we're told to do, what we're pressured to do, how we're raised, how society is, suppresses a lot of our life force in many, many ways and causes all kinds of distortions. And so these Nagas can cause us a lot of grief. Okay? But that's not their goal. Their goal is to, what they truly symbolize is a healthy flow of life force that supports all these other beings and them bringing us to realization. But we have to bring that life force into useful, focused control and not have it distorted and twisted and repressed and suppressed into all kinds of ways. Now I say that, you might think, oh yeah, everyone's suppressed sexually. I'm not even talking about that context. Yes, there's an aspect to that. But if you want to be an artist and you force yourself to go to school as a scientist, your Naga is not going to be happy. Okay, you're distorting your life force by forcing your life force to focus on something that's not you. Okay? And the Nagas are very, very intelligent. This life force is intelligent. It's not just energy, it's intelligent energy. And it will do certain things. And we want to do healthy, beautiful, intelligent things. If it gets distorted, it does crazy things. You know, there are psychotic people who do horrible, crazy things, and they have a fantastic capacity or intelligence to do so. This life force, when twisted, is just as intelligent. You got the master manipulator. How did they learn to manipulate that? Did they go to manipulator school? No. Their life force gets distorted. And so they learn how to manipulate. They just have this intelligence. This life force, when distorted, turns into manipulative energy, is one of the forms it might take. And we see this. I'm also currently teaching a handwriting course. For those taking that course, you'll see in handwriting, a lot of the shapes we're looking at that cause major problems, you can just see it. They're twisted and turned and distorted formations. They're basically representing distortions in the person's life force, a distorted Naga. And there's a cunning there in that, and there's a manipulation in there, and it's intelligent, whether healthy or distorted. It's extremely intelligent. So if we focus that life force on something that's truly us, we can have great knowledge, great understanding in a moment. If not, and it's twisted and distorted on a severe level, then we know how to manipulate people. People just know. There's master manipulators out there. This is how they know. Distorted Nagas, distorted life force, and that life force still is intelligent to live life in a distorted way. And we'll see that in their handwriting at a glance. Okay? The final being is the Rakshasa. The root of Rakshasa is Raksh, which means to guard or to protect against. Okay? Now, Rakshasas at different times are those we have to protect against and those who guard. They've played both ends of that stick. Okay? And the Rakshasa force in us does both. it protects us, and we have to protect against it. And originally it protected us. And then it got distorted, overprotective, and then it turned into a monster that we have to defend against. Most of our psychological issues all have a basis in the Rakshasa. Okay, I mean, we have to uproot this Rakshasa. The Rakshasa is the cause of most of our problems, actually. Just like in mythology, it's always the Rakshasa who's the bad guy. That's not their job, it's what they've become, though. It's not what they were born for, it's what they've become, which we'll learn. And these Rakshasas represent our wounds, basically. So if anyone's studied any wound stuff with me, like the Lajitati courses where I've gotten into wounds, psychological wounds, and how these psychological wounds are really nothing but an attempt to protect us, followed through in a distorted way that gets us into the very trouble we want to avoid. That's the Rakshasa force. That's what the Rakshasa force can do. So it's a very, very important part of this. It's probably the third aspect we're going to cover in this course. We're going to take many, many courses, many, many loops around the ecliptic here. Okay? But I'll talk about that more in a moment. Right now I want to focus more on these Rakshasas. Okay. Oh, in myth also, Rakshasas can be any external force that they have to protect against. So when the Persians show up in India, they're Rakshasas, at that point. Anyone that we have to protect against is a Rakshasa. So lots of times invaders got the label of Rakshasas, okay? Because they have to be protected against. But that doesn't mean they're the same Rakshasas of mythology, which are beings that can take on human forms, who love having humans for dessert, and who sometimes marry humans and sometimes are great heroes. In fact, the greatest devotee, in the Gita, Krishna is asked, who's the greatest devotee? He goes, Prahlad. Prahlad is a Rakshasa child, okay? They're like the Titans of Greek mythology and the giants of Norse mythology. These are Rakshasa-type beings, okay? They're always at odds with the gods. But they were created by the gods, like all things were, for a purpose, which we'll talk about when we dive into Rakshasas more, okay? They're the invaders internally that destroy our peace, destroy our happiness, okay? Like someone will be happy, they'll be in love, and then they start playing all these games because they're scared. Well, that's the Rakshasa ruining your love life, okay? So they're always at war with the Devas, always at war with our peace, okay? But they're not inherently evil. The greatest devotee was Rakshasa, Bhima, the very, very important Pandu brother, the most physically powerful, great warrior, Bhima. He married, a Rakshasa. I believe he also, if I'm not messing things up, he also married a Naga. I mean, this guy had it all, right? Naga wife, Rakshasa wife, and one of the more known myths of humans breeding with these other races, okay? And his sons that he had with his Rakshasa wife were great warriors that fought in the Kurukshetra war. So the original purpose of Rakshasas is for good, but then they turn into something to be guarded against. And as you'll find out later, there's a reason and a purpose for that. It's not a mistake. When the Naga is not operating well, that's a mistake. The Rakshasa is supposed to be causing you trouble. That's his job, okay? So in lots of ways, we have the least trouble with the Rakshasa aspect of the sign. It's supposed to cause us trouble, so it does, and it's doing its job. But none of the other ones are meant to cause us trouble, but they will cause us great trouble if we are not use them in a healthy way. And how do we know? We examine the quality of the avastas of the planets, of course. Okay. Okay. Talk more about all these later. Now, in this course, I'm basically going to break it down into circles around the ecliptic. Okay? It's a lot to cover. We're going to do it in layers. Okay? And this is how I'm envisioning it now, but I might change depending on what happens on the course. In the first circle around the ecliptic, we are going to cover the Rishis and the Adityas. or the Aditya and the Rishi in that order. The reason being because we have the most mythological information on these beings. The Aditya is the foundation of the sign. Okay, it's the foundation symbol. The Rakshasas and all the other beings, they help facilitate our understanding of that Aditya. But all of them are part of that Aditya. They travel with the Aditya. They don't make the Aditya. They travel with it. They show us nuances of that Aditya force. Okay? So when we really understand the Aditya, it helps us grasp what the other beings symbolize truly. That's very important to do because, like I said, on some of these beings we have very little, and on some beings we have no mythology at all available. Okay? Although somewhere in India, somewhere, someone knows something, I'm sure. But do they even care about astrology? Do they even speak English? Who knows? All I know is I don't know them. And I don't know anyone who knows them, okay? So when we really understand, by really understanding the Aditya, it'll help us grasp the deeper meanings of the other beings. And sometimes that's more necessary than others, okay? Similarly, the Rishi, we have the most information, second most information on the Rishis. Some Rishis we have so much information it's like overkill. Other Rishis we have just a little bit, okay? And we wish we had a lot more. But we have a lot of information from the books, ancient books of India on the Rishis. And that's also a very, very important part because the Rishis were the firstborn beings, okay? So they're on a very primordial level. They exist. And so we want to understand things on these most fundamental primordial levels. So as we get onto differentiations of these forces, which the other beings represent, we have a really good foundation of what we're doing. In fact, the Rishis and the Adityas are so powerful that you want to learn this even if these 5 other beings didn't exist. If these 5 beings didn't exist, what you're going to learn about your chart, about astrology, about the people in your life, about what's happening with your predictions, when you just know the Aditya and the Rishi, will be wow. Okay? And so if you drop out of the course after we do the Adityas and Rishi, you're going to be fine. You're going to be an awesome Aditya astrologer. They're very powerful, useful things. Okay? And they represent the largest part of how we'll be using the Adityas. Okay? The other 5 beings are of much more minor importance, believe it or not. Okay? And the Adityas and Rishis, in every reading, yes, I'm using those. I find a way to use them in a very important way. The other ones, sometimes I don't use the other beings all the time because I can't fit it into the spectrum of the reading. With these 2, they just hit home every time. Okay? And so they're the larger part of this, with, of course, the Aditya being the largest part. Okay? So after we go around that, we also will be going around the zodiac, or the circle. Okay, it's not a zodiac because it's not a circle of animals anymore, which zodiac means. Zoology, it has to do with living creatures, beings on earth. We're not dealing with that. We're dealing with sun gods. So this is not a zodiac anymore. It's simply the circle of Adityas, which is a circle of sun gods and the beings that they travel with. And we will, so after we go through that first loop of Rishi and Aditya, we'll go into loops of, okay, let's work out elements. Let's work out varnas of the Rishis, or of the Adityas. Varnas are the castes. We're going to work out other details from these things based on the Aditya symbols and the Rishi symbols. We're going to round out what that really means. And so we're going to do several loops around where we're getting a deeper grasp of these 2 beings, the Aditya and the Rishi, on more practical levels and things that we will use on day-to-day readings, day-to-day predictions, day-to-day compatibilities. Okay? So much stuff I've been waiting to teach you guys for 4 years that I had to teach Adityas first. I've been going, well, why didn't I teach so many classes yet? In my mind, there's all these classes I haven't taught because I've been waiting to get the Adityas out to you all. So as we go through this, we're starting a foundation of a lot of new great astrology stuff that I haven't been able to share with you. because you didn't know the Adityas yet. Then we're going to take loops around in the context, okay, Jamie. Jamie gives really profound meanings of the signs. Really, I love the interpretation of Jamie of the signs. The older I get, the more I do astrology, the more I use them, the deeper I use them, the more I favor them. We're also going to bring that into the context of the circle of Adityas, okay? And we're going to bring planetary lords into the circle of Adityas. We're going to do all these circles around, one circle at a time, and deepening our knowledge and developing the practicalities of using this in astrology in all ways. Where when we fully get done with this course, you'll never have to go back to Aries and Taurus and Gemini if you don't want to. But I highly recommend you do, because there's so much great symbology there. And then we don't have to rediscover why one Aditya rules rocky places like Aries does. We can just say Aries rules rocky places. Okay? Because the signs of the zodiac and the Adityas overlap each other. Each 30-degree Aditya is exactly equal to one 30-degree zodiac sign. Okay? So we don't have to lose any symbology. The Rashi symbology is so powerful. I've done 2 Rashi courses. The second one I did to add a lot of stuff, but I also kept the first one because it's so good. Rashi symbols, if you really dive into them, are powerful, powerful, powerful. But we're adding a whole nother layer here, so we want to go deeper. The more I do astrology, the more I see how the signs of the zodiac, or the Adityas, those 30-degree sections, how they're the most important thing. They are the most important thing in astrology. They're more important than the planet. You know, at the end of the day, they are. They're more important than the nakshatras. I know there's a big nakshatra boom right now that's been going on for 10 years. Everything's about nakshatras, nakshatras, nakshatras. I haven't gone that way. So the more I do astrology, I find like, wow, it's all about the signs. There's a reason Jamie, the most important book on astrology, is completely a sign-based system of astrology. So we're going to be able to dig deeper into the signs because of these Adityas. And then we'll continue going around the loop. We'll bring in the Rakshasas on another turn around the ecliptic. We'll introduce all 12 Rakshasas. Then we'll do all 12, Apsaras and Gandharvas. We'll probably do them together. And then we'll go do like the Nagas, and we will do, till we get all 7 beings done. And then we'll have a whole world of information and symbols. And as you do it, you should have many, many aha experiences of why your life or the lives of others has been a certain way. There's things with the Adityas that when I see, I can just say now, it's like things I would have never have had a way to predict. Your father was like this. Things I could have never have come up with without knowing the Adityas. Okay? And they're right every time. Really, really great symbols that come down to real world interpretations that people immediately go, oh yes, I relate to that. Yep, that's true. Okay? Really concrete, good stuff. All right. Next class, we're going to talk about the exact calculations. I think anyone who watched the YouTube has an idea or knows it, but I just need to cover that to make sure this class completes everything. And really, that's it. I hope a lot of people jump on board the Adityas and really get into this deep level of symbology that is really going to enrich our life as astrologers. Okay, thank you.